The night of November 13, 1974, began like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Amityville, Long Island. The streets were calm, the houses stood silent, and the air carried a sense of peace that only a small, close-knit community could offer. It was a night like countless others, where families felt safe within the walls of their homes, and the troubles of the world seemed far away. A light breeze rustled through the trees, whispering secrets to the night. The leaves danced gently, casting fleeting shadows on the ground as if nature itself was trying to communicate a warning that went unheard. Families settled in for the night, unaware of the darkness creeping towards 112 Ocean Avenue. Children were tucked into bed, parents relaxed in their living rooms, and the hum of everyday life filled the air. It was a scene of normalcy, of routine, of the mundane comforts that make up the fabric of suburban life. Inside the large Dutch colonial house, however, a storm was brewing. This was no ordinary storm, but one that would leave a permanent scar on the community. The house, with its distinctive gambrel roof and iconic windows, stood as a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. It wasn't a storm of wind and rain, but one of madness and violence. Shadows moved inside the house, flickering lights hinted at the chaos within. The tranquility of the night was about to be shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. By morning, the quaint facade of the DeFeo family home would be shattered, revealing a scene of unimaginable horror. 6 lives brutally taken. The sun rose to illuminate a house that had become a crime scene, a place where innocence was lost, and nightmares became reality. One chilling question left hanging in the air: what happened inside 112 Ocean Avenue? The number 112, once just an address, now carried a weight of dread and mystery. It became a symbol of the inexplicable, a question mark that loomed over the town. Some say evil permeates the very foundation of that house. They speak of a malevolent force, an evil presence that drove the events of that night. The house, with its dark history, became a focal point for tales of the supernatural, of forces beyond human understanding. Others claim it was a tragic case of a family torn apart by their own demons. The DeFeo family, once seemingly perfect, had hidden cracks that widened into chasms of despair and violence. The fragmented family photo, a poignant reminder of what once was, now lay shattered, much like the lives it depicted. Tonight, we delve into the horrifying events of that fateful night. We examine the evidence, we explore the theories, the flashing lights of the police cars, the hushed whispers of the neighbors, all paint a picture of a community grappling with the unthinkable. We ask the question that has haunted this small town for decades: was it just a man, or was it something more sinister at play? The full moon cast an eerie glow on the house, as if nature itself was spotlighting the mystery that lay within. Get ready, because tonight, we're diving headfirst into the chilling truth behind the Amityville murders. We will peel back the layers of myth and reality to uncover the true story of what happened on that ordinary night that turned into an unthinkable horror. The DeFeo family seemed on the surface like any other. Patriarch Ronald DeFeo Sr. ruled with an iron fist. His wife Louise tried to keep the peace. They had 5 children: Ronald Jr., Butch, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John. However, behind the facade of normalcy, darkness festered. Ronald Sr. was known for his explosive temper and abusive behavior. The children lived in fear. Whispers of family secrets and simmering resentment followed them like shadows. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue, with its grand exterior and spacious rooms, should have been a haven. Instead, it became a pressure cooker. The family's dysfunction intensified within its walls. Neighbors reported shouting matches, doors slamming. Some even claimed to see fleeting figures in the windows, shadows moving just out of sight. Whether these were genuine paranormal occurrences or simply the product of an overactive imagination, one thing was clear: the DeFeo family harbored secrets, and those secrets would soon paint the walls of their home with blood. Around 3:15 a.m., the silence of the night was shattered by the roar of a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. The tranquility of the suburban neighborhood was abruptly replaced by a sense of dread and confusion. The stillness of the night, which had been a comforting blanket for the residents, was now a haunting reminder of the violence that had just occurred. 6 shots rang out, each one a nail in the coffin of the DeFeo family's fate. The echoes of the gunfire reverberated through the quiet streets, a grim symphony that marked the end of innocence for this peaceful community. Neighbors, startled from their sleep, would later recount the chilling sounds that pierced the night, unaware of the horror unfolding just a few houses away. Upstairs in their beds, Ronald Sr., Louise, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John were systematically executed. The family, who had once shared laughter and love within these walls, now lay lifeless, victims of an unimaginable act of violence. Each shot was a calculated move, a deliberate act that left no room for mercy or hesitation. Each family member was found lying face down, their dreams extinguished in a torrent of violence. The sight was a macabre tableau, a stark contrast to the warmth and safety that a home is supposed to provide. The positions of their bodies suggested a sudden, overwhelming force, one that left them no chance to react or escape. But amidst the carnage, there was an eerie absence, a struggle, a cry for help, any sign that the victims had tried to fight back. It was as if they had been caught in a nightmare from which they could not wake. The silence of their final moments was deafening, a void that spoke volumes about the terror they must have felt. It was as if they had accepted their gruesome fate. The lack of defensive wounds or signs of a struggle puzzled investigators, leading them to question the circumstances of the murders. How could an entire family be so easily subdued? What kind of fear or coercion had kept them from fighting back? The killer, as we know, was 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., a young man with a troubled past. Butch had a history of erratic behavior and conflicts with his family. Yet, no one could have predicted the extent of his rage or the cold-blooded nature of his actions that night. He would later claim that voices, demonic whispers urging him on, had driven him to commit the horrific act. These alleged voices, he said, had tormented him, pushing him to the brink of sanity. Whether these claims were a desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable or a genuine glimpse into his disturbed mind, they added a chilling layer to an already horrifying story. But the calculated precision of the murders, the lack of any struggle, painted a different picture. It suggested a level of premeditation and control that was at odds with the idea of a man driven to madness by unseen forces. The methodical nature of the killings indicated a mind that was disturbingly clear and focused on its deadly mission. The scene suggested a cold-blooded execution, not a fit of madness. The evidence pointed to a deliberate, calculated act of violence, one that required planning and a chilling detachment from the humanity of his victims. This was not the work of a man in the throes of a psychotic break, but rather someone who had made a conscious decision to end the lives of those closest to him. As investigators combed through the blood-soaked bedrooms, they were left with a chilling question. What could drive a son to annihilate his entire family in such a calculated, merciless manner? The answers, if they existed, were buried deep within the twisted psyche of Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., a young man whose actions would forever haunt the quiet streets of this once peaceful neighborhood. The sun rose on a scene of unimaginable horror. The quiet suburban neighborhood, usually a picture of tranquility, was now the epicenter of a gruesome crime that would shock the nation. The DeFeo family home, once a symbol of the American dream, had become a house of nightmares. The early morning light did little to dispel the darkness that had settled over the town. Butch DeFeo Jr., seemingly unfazed by the carnage he had orchestrated, went about his day with a chilling normalcy. His demeanor was disturbingly calm, as if the events of the previous night had no bearing on his conscience. He walked through the suburban streets, his expression blank, his mind seemingly elsewhere. To the casual observer, he was just another young man starting his day. He clocked in for work, acted surprised by the news of his family's demise, and even joined the throng of onlookers gathering at the crime scene. His performance was almost theatrical, a macabre play where he was both the actor and the audience. He mingled with the crowd, his face a mask of feigned shock and sorrow. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. His performance, however, was unconvincing. Those who knew him sensed something was off. His reactions were too calculated, his emotions too rehearsed. The unease in his eyes betrayed the facade he was trying so hard to maintain. It was as if he was playing a role he hadn't fully prepared for, and the cracks were beginning to show. His stories were inconsistent, riddled with holes and contradictions. Each time he recounted the events, the details changed. One moment he was a helpless witness, the next a reluctant participant. The authorities, trained to detect deception, quickly picked up on the discrepancies. His narrative was like a poorly woven tapestry, threads of truth and lies tangled together in a confusing mess. The police, their suspicions piqued by his erratic behavior, began to suspect that Butch knew more than he was letting on. They observed him closely, noting every nervous twitch, every hesitant pause. The more he spoke, the deeper he seemed to dig himself into a hole. His attempts to mislead only served to tighten the net around him. As the day wore on, Butch's facade crumbled. The weight of his lies became too much to bear. His confident exterior gave way to visible distress. He was no longer the composed young man who had started the day. The reality of his actions was beginning to catch up with him, and it showed in every strained expression, every anxious glance. He changed his story multiple times, first claiming to have witnessed the murders, then confessing to killing his father in self-defense before finally admitting to the murders of his entire family. Each version of events differed wildly from the last, adding another layer to the already convoluted case. His shifting narratives were a desperate attempt to find a version that would absolve him, but instead, they only served to incriminate him further. Each version of events differed wildly from the last, adding another layer to the already convoluted case. The investigators were left sifting through a web of deceit, trying to piece together the truth from the fragments of Butch's conflicting accounts. His agitation grew with each retelling, the pressure of maintaining his lies becoming increasingly unbearable. With each lie, each inconsistency, Butch tightened the noose around his own neck. His desperation was palpable, his attempts to control the narrative slipping through his fingers like sand. The more he tried to manipulate the story, the more entangled he became in his own web of deceit. The police watched as he unraveled, their suspicions turning into certainty. The police, armed with a mountain of evidence and a confession riddled with inconsistencies, were certain. Butch DeFeo Jr. was their man. They had the physical evidence, the witness statements, and now, a series of confessions that, despite their contradictions, pointed to one undeniable truth. Butch was guilty. The case against him was solidifying, the pieces falling into place. But what they couldn't understand was the why. What could drive a man to commit such an unspeakable act against his own family? The motive remained elusive, a dark shadow over the case. The investigators were left grappling with the psychological puzzle, trying to comprehend the mind of a killer. The why was a question that gnawed at them, a piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. What drove him to commit such an act of unspeakable evil? Was it a moment of madness, a lifetime of resentment, or something even darker? The answers were not forthcoming, and the more they delved into Butch's past, the more questions they uncovered. The house, now a symbol of horror, stood as a silent witness to the events that had transpired within its walls. That question, like a specter, would continue to haunt the investigation. The search for answers would lead them down dark paths, exploring the depths of human nature and the capacity for evil. The case of Butch DeFeo Jr. was not just a story of a crime, but a journey into the heart of darkness, a reminder of the thin line between sanity and madness. Dennis Rader. To the unsuspecting residents of Wichita, Kansas, he was a man of normalcy, a face in the crowd. He blended seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life, never drawing undue attention to himself. He was a husband, a father, a devout churchgoer. His family saw him as a loving and responsible man, someone who provided for them and participated in their lives with genuine interest. A respected member of the community, he attended local events, shook hands with neighbors, and was always ready to lend a helping hand. His presence was comforting, his demeanor unassuming. He was, in the truest sense of the word, invisible. No one suspected. He moved through life like a shadow, never giving anyone a reason to look twice. No one knew the darkness that lurked beneath this carefully constructed facade of ordinariness. Behind the smiles and the friendly gestures was a man with a sinister secret. Rader's double life was a masterpiece of deception. He had perfected the art of appearing normal while hiding his true nature. It was a chilling duality that he maintained with meticulous care. He lived amongst his unsuspecting neighbors, all the while harboring a horrifying secret. His actions were calculated, his movements deliberate, ensuring that his true self remained hidden. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a predator masquerading as a pillar of the community. His ability to deceive was his greatest weapon, allowing him to operate undetected for years. This jarring contrast, this terrifying duality, is what makes the case of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, so deeply unsettling. The man who seemed so ordinary was capable of unimaginable horrors. Rader's outward life was meticulously crafted. Every detail was designed to reinforce the image of a normal, upstanding citizen. He was methodical in his approach, leaving nothing to chance. He was a Boy Scout leader, guiding young minds. He took on roles that would further cement his image as a trustworthy and reliable individual, someone who could be counted on. He held a job as a compliance officer, enforcing rules and regulations. His position gave him authority and respect, adding another layer to his carefully constructed persona. He was an active member of his church, a man of faith in the eyes of his congregation. His participation in religious activities further solidified his image as a moral and upright individual. It was a life lived in the open, a life of manufactured normalcy. He engaged in everyday activities, blending in with his surroundings, never giving anyone a reason to doubt his integrity. He was hiding in plain sight, a master manipulator who used the mundane to shield himself from suspicion. His ability to appear ordinary was his greatest disguise. His story is a stark reminder that evil often lurks in the most unexpected places, concealed by a veneer of normalcy that can be as convincing as it is terrifying. The case of Dennis Rader forces us to confront the unsettling reality that sometimes the most dangerous individuals are the ones who seem the most ordinary. The acronym BTK, chilling in its simplicity, stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. This was not merely a descriptor of Dennis Rader's modus operandi, it was his self-proclaimed title, a chilling moniker he used to brand his heinous acts. The BTK signature, a stark reflection of his sadistic desires, cast a pall over Wichita for decades. Rader's crimes were as calculated as they were cruel. He meticulously stalked his victims, learning their routines, exploiting their vulnerabilities. His methods were deliberate, almost ritualistic. He would bind their hands and feet, often using household items found at the scene. Then, the torture would begin. The torture was never swift, never merciful. It was a slow, agonizing process designed to inflict maximum pain and terror. Rader reveled in the suffering of his victims, drawing out their agony as a form of perverse entertainment. His need for control, for power, was paramount. Finally, when his gruesome desires were satiated, he would kill. Each murder was as cold and calculated as the last, carried out with an eerie detachment that spoke to the depths of his depravity. The BTK signature was a calling card of terror, a grim reminder to the people of Wichita that a monster walked among them. The path to becoming a monster is often paved with disturbing milestones, red flags that in retrospect seem to scream a warning. These early signs are often subtle, almost imperceptible, but they are there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be noticed. Dennis Rader's childhood, while seemingly normal on the surface, was marked by a number of troubling signs that hinted at the darkness festering within. His family and friends might have seen him as just another boy, but there were moments that stood out, moments that, in hindsight, were clear indicators of the path he was on. Even as a child, there was a cruelty to Rader that set him apart. He was not like other children. There was a coldness in his eyes, a detachment that was unsettling. He seemed to take pleasure in the suffering of others, a trait that would only grow stronger as he aged. Animals, often seen as innocent and vulnerable, became the target of his sadistic curiosity. He would trap stray animals, subjecting them to unimaginable torture. These acts of cruelty weren't mere boyhood indiscretions, they were chilling foreshadowing of the monster he would become. As Rader grew older, his disturbing behavior escalated. He developed a fetish for women's underwear, stealing undergarments from neighbors and even his own family members. This behavior, often dismissed as harmless or even humorous, was a clear indication of his distorted views on sexuality and his growing obsession with control and domination. There were other signs too, an obsession with knots and ligatures, a fascination with true crime and detective magazines. These seemingly disparate interests, when viewed through the lens of his later crimes, formed a disturbing pattern, a mosaic of warning signs that tragically went unnoticed or ignored. The seeds of darkness sown in childhood had taken root, slowly twisting him into the monster known as BTK. His actions were not random, they were the result of a deeply ingrained pathology, a darkness that had been growing within him for years. As he entered his teenage years, Rader's behavior became more erratic and more dangerous. He began to stalk women, watching them from the shadows, fantasizing about the control he could exert over them. His fantasies grew darker, more violent, and he began to plan how he could turn these fantasies into reality. His fetish for women's underwear was not just about the thrill of stealing, it was about power and control. He would wear the stolen garments, imagining himself as his victims, feeling the power he held over them. This behavior was a clear sign of his growing obsession with domination and control. His obsession with knots and ligatures was another troubling sign. He would spend hours practicing different types of knots, perfecting his technique. This was not just a hobby, it was a preparation for the crimes he would later commit. His fascination with true crime and detective magazines was also a clear indicator of his dark interests. He would read about other criminals, learning from their mistakes, planning how he could avoid capture. These interests, when viewed in isolation, might seem harmless, but together they formed a disturbing pattern. They were the building blocks of the monster he would become, the early warning signs that, if noticed, might have prevented the horrors he would later commit. The seeds of darkness sown in childhood had taken root, slowly twisting him into the monster known as BTK. His actions were not random, they were the result of a deeply ingrained pathology, a darkness that had been growing within him for years. These seemingly disparate interests, when viewed through the lens of his later crimes, formed a disturbing pattern, a mosaic of warning signs that tragically, when unnoticed, were ignored. The seeds of darkness sown in childhood had taken root, slowly twisting him into the monster known as BTK. The seeds of darkness sown in childhood had taken root, slowly twisting him into the monster known as BTK. The reign of terror inflicted upon Wichita by Dennis Rader, the self-proclaimed BTK, spanned over a decade, leaving a trail of heartbreak and fear in its wake. His moniker, BTK, stood for Bind, Torture, Kill, a chilling summary of his modus operandi. Rader's ability to blend into the community, living a seemingly normal life, only added to the horror. He was a family man, a church leader, and a compliance officer, hiding his monstrous alter ego behind a mask of normalcy. His victims, often chosen at random, were united in their horrifying fate at the hands of a cunning and merciless killer. The randomness of his attacks meant that no one felt safe. People began to take extra precautions, locking their doors and windows, and looking over their shoulders, fearing they might be next. The Otero family, Joseph, Julie, Josephine, and Joseph Jr., became Rader's first victims in 1974. The brutality of their murders was unprecedented in Wichita. Joseph and Julie were found bound and strangled, while their children, Josephine and Joseph Jr., met similarly horrific fates. The community was left in shock, unable to comprehend the savagery of the crime. Their murders, as shocking as they were brutal, sent shockwaves through Wichita. The media coverage was extensive, with headlines screaming the gruesome details, further instilling fear in the hearts of the residents. The police were under immense pressure to catch the perpetrator, but Rader was meticulous, leaving behind little evidence. The meticulous manner in which their lives were taken, the chilling discovery of their bound bodies, marked the beginning of a nightmare for the city. Rader's methodical approach to his crimes made him a formidable adversary for law enforcement. He took his time, ensuring that every detail was perfect, every knot tied just right, every scene left in a state of eerie calm. 4 years later, in 1978, Rader claimed the life of Shirley Vian. Her murder was as calculated and cold-blooded as the Otero family's. Rader had a pattern, a ritual that he followed, and Shirley Vian was unfortunate enough to become part of it. Found bound and strangled in her own home, her murder further fueled the growing sense of panic in Wichita. The community's fear was palpable, with residents feeling the weight of the invisible threat that loomed over them. The police were working tirelessly, but Rader's ability to evade capture only added to the city's anxiety. The city was on edge, haunted by the knowledge that a predator lurked among them. Neighborhood watch groups were formed, and people began to take their safety into their own hands. The sense of community was strong, but so was the fear that anyone could be the next victim. Rader's reign of terror continued with the murders of Nancy Fox in 1977, a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. Her life was cut short in a manner that had become all too familiar to the residents of Wichita. Maureen Hedge in 1985, a beloved neighbor and friend, whose death left a void in her community. Her murder was a stark reminder that Rader could strike at any time, and no one was safe. And Vicki Wagerly in 1986, a young mother whose life was brutally taken, leaving her family and friends devastated. Each of these murders was a calculated act of violence, designed to instill fear and assert Rader's control over the city. Each victim, each crime scene, bore the chilling hallmarks of the BTK signature. The letters he sent to the police and media, taunting them with his crimes, only added to the terror. He enjoyed the game, the cat-and-mouse chase, and the power he held over the city. The city of Wichita held its breath. living in the shadow of a killer who seemingly vanished into thin air after each gruesome act. The fear was ever present, a dark cloud that hung over the city, as residents waited for the next strike, hoping and praying that it would never. New Orleans, 1918. Jazz filled the air, but something sinister lurked in the shadows. The French Quarter, with its vibrant life, became a place of fear. Someone was stalking the night. People called him the Axeman. The city was already on edge. World War I raged across the ocean. Now, a different kind of terror gripped the city. Residents feared what darkness would bring. The police were baffled. Who was the Axeman, and what did he want? May 23, 1918. It was a quiet night in New Orleans, the kind of night where the city seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with humidity, and the streets were eerily silent. Joseph Maggio, a grocer, slept soundly beside his wife Catherine. They had no idea that their lives were about to change forever. A noise awoke him. It was faint but persistent, like a whisper in the dark. He got out of bed to investigate, thinking it might be a stray animal or a loose shutter. He never found the source of the sound. Instead, he found the Axeman, a shadowy figure lurking in the doorway, holding an axe that glinted menacingly in the dim light. Catherine awoke to a chilling thud and her husband's screams. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of the chaos around her. She rushed to help him, her mind filled with dread. The sight that greeted her was horrific, something out of a nightmare. Joseph lay in a pool of blood. His head was almost severed, a gruesome testament to the brutality of the attack. Catherine, too, was attacked. She barely survived, her body and spirit scarred by the ordeal. The Axeman had left his mark. This was no ordinary burglar. The weapon he used and the ferocity of the attack spoke of something far more sinister. This was something far more sinister. The Axeman would go on to become one of the most feared figures in New Orleans history, a specter of terror that haunted the city for years to come. The Axeman didn't stop with the Maggios. His brutal spree continued, leaving a trail of blood and fear in his wake. Each attack was more gruesome than the last, sending shockwaves through the community. His reign of terror continued. The newspapers were filled with horrifying accounts of his crimes, and the public's anxiety grew with each passing day. He always targeted Italian grocers. These small business owners were the backbone of their communities, and their murders left a void that was deeply felt. He used an axe, always aiming for the head. The brutality of his method was shocking, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who heard about it. The city was on high alert. People were terrified. They locked their doors and windows, fearing that they might be the next victims of this relentless killer. The police worked tirelessly. They followed every lead, no matter how small, hoping to catch the Axeman before he could strike again. But their efforts seemed in vain. But the Axeman was always one step ahead. He moved through the shadows, evading capture and leaving the city in a state of constant dread. Theories spread like wildfire. Was it a deranged lunatic? People speculated endlessly, trying to make sense of the senseless violence. A scorned lover? Or something even more sinister? The mystery only deepened as the attacks continued, and the fear grew. Fear permeated the city as thick as the humid New Orleans air. The Axeman's presence was felt everywhere, and no one knew when or where he would strike next. Then, the Axeman did something unexpected. In a move that shocked the entire city, he reached out directly to the public. He sent a letter to the newspaper, a chilling message that would be printed for all to see. In this letter, he claimed responsibility for the brutal murders that had terrorized the city. He promised more to come, instilling fear and uncertainty in the hearts of the residents. But there was a catch, a sinister twist that no one saw coming. He offered a chilling deal, one that would force the city to make a choice. The Axeman declared his love for jazz music, an unexpected passion for such a ruthless killer. He promised to spare any house where jazz was playing, a bizarre and terrifying ultimatum. On the night of March 19, 1919, every venue in New Orleans was packed with people. Jazz music filled the streets, a desperate plea for mercy from a city gripped by fear. The city held its breath, waiting to see if the Axeman would keep it. Delphi, Indiana. A town where time seemed to drift along the currents of Deer Creek. A place where life unfolded at a gentler pace, cradled by the embrace of the Hoosier heartland. But this serenity hid a darkness, a secret waiting to surface. At the edge of town stood the Monon High Bridge, a sentinel of iron and wood. It was a place of simple beauty, where the whispers of the wind danced through the trees, and the sun painted golden hues across the creek below. For generations, the bridge had been a cherished landmark, a place for quiet contemplation and carefree laughter. But on February 13, 2017, the bridge bore silent witness to an unspeakable horror that would forever stain its weathered planks. Liberty Libby German, 14, was a bright spark, a talented musician with a contagious laugh. Abigail Abby Williams, 13, was known for her kindness and infectious smile. They were the best of friends, two souls who found solace and adventure in each other's company. Life in Delphi revolved around school, family, and the simple pleasures of small-town life. Libby and Abby were inseparable, sharing secrets, dreams, and the unbreakable bond of teenage friendship. They were a familiar sight around Delphi, their laughter echoing through the park, their bikes a blur of color against the backdrop of the Indiana sky. February 13, 2017, dawned bright and crisp, a snow makeup day offering a break from the classroom. Libby's older sister dropped the girls off at the Monon High Bridge trailhead for an afternoon of adventure. 1:35 p.m. The girls, full of life and the spirit of exploration, disappeared into the woods, their laughter swallowed by the vast expanse of the Indiana wilderness. It was the last time they were seen alive. 2:07 p.m. A chilling clue emerged from the digital ether. A Snapchat image sent from Libby's phone captured Abby walking tentatively across the Monon High Bridge. The image, seemingly innocuous, would later become a haunting piece of evidence. 5:30 p.m. As dusk settled over Delphi, casting long shadows across the land, a chilling realization gripped the community. Libby and Abby were missing. The disappearance of Libby and Abby sent shockwaves through the close-knit community of Delphi. The unthinkable had happened. Their faces, frozen in time on missing person posters, became a haunting symbol of innocence lost. The search was immediate and relentless. Hundreds of volunteers, their faces etched with worry and determination, combed through the woods, their desperate calls echoing through the trees. First responders, their faces grim, worked tirelessly, following every lead, chasing every shadow. But as hours turned into an agonizing night, a sense of dread began to creep in. The following day, Valentine's Day, brought with it a discovery that shattered the town's innocence. Less than a mile from the Monon High Bridge, in a rugged patch of terrain only accessible by foot, a search party stumbled upon the unthinkable. The bodies of Libby and Abby, their young lives cut tragically short. The idyllic landscape of Delphi was now a crime scene, the tranquility shattered by the weight of the tragedy. The investigation intensified, a desperate race against time to find the person responsible for this heinous act. Among Libby's belongings, investigators discovered a crucial piece of evidence: her mobile phone. It contained a haunting video, a chilling glimpse into the girl's final moments. The video showed a grainy figure, a man dressed in jeans and a blue jacket, walking towards them on the bridge. His voice, a raspy whisper, sent chills down the spines of investigators as he uttered the words, "Guys, down the hill." The video and audio from Libby's phone became the focal point of the investigation. The grainy image of the man on the bridge, his face obscured by shadow, became seared into the public's consciousness. He became known as the Bridge Guy, a phantom haunting the dreams of a community desperate for answers. 2 distinct police sketches were released, each offering a slightly different interpretation of the man's features. Tips poured in, each one meticulously investigated, but the case remained unsolved. Years passed, seasons changed, but the memory of Libby and Abby and the mystery of their killer lingered like a ghost in the Indiana air. October 2022, a name surfaced from the sea of frustration and despair: Richard Allen, a familiar face in Delphi, someone who had blended into the fabric of the town. He had even been interviewed by investigators in the early days of the investigation, but was not initially considered a primary suspect. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, a mix of relief and disbelief. Could this unassuming man, a neighbor, a fellow resident of their quiet town, be the monster they had been searching for all these years? As details of the investigation unfurled, a more disturbing picture began to emerge. Allegations of a possible larger network, whispers of ritualistic elements, and claims of multiple suspects added another layer of complexity to an already perplexing case. The long-awaited trial of Richard Allen began in October 2022. The eyes of the nation turned to a small courtroom in Allen County, where the fate of a community's quest for justice hung in the balance. The trial was moved to Carroll County, and the prosecution presented its case, relying heavily on the video and audio evidence from Libby's phone. The defense, however, argued that the evidence was circumstantial, and that the investigation had been flawed from the beginning. As the trial progressed, more questions than answers seemed to arise. Why were Libby and Abby targeted? What was the motive behind their murders? Were there other individuals involved? The Delphi murders serve as a stark reminder that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected of places, shattering the tranquility of small-town life. The quest for justice for Libby and Abby continues, a testament to the resilience of a community determined to honor their memory. The case remains shrouded in mystery, a haunting reminder of the fragility of innocence and the enduring power of hope in the face of tragedy. The bridge to tragedy still stands, a silent sentinel overlooking the creek, forever linked to the memory of two young lives cut short. The air was crisp and cool, pine trees whispered secrets in the mountain breeze. Keddie Resort, nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills of California, promised tranquility. But on the night of April 11, 1981, evil descended upon Cabin 28. Peace shattered, replaced by a scene of unimaginable violence. The Sharp family, seeking refuge from city life, had no idea of the horror that awaited. Glenna Sue Sharp, a loving mother of 5, was there with her children. John, 15, playful and full of life. Sheila, 14, on the cusp of womanhood. Tina, just a child at 12, with a bright smile that could light up a room. Joining them were John's friend, 12-year-old Dana Wingate, and Greg, Sue's 15-year-old son from a previous relationship. The children played board games, their laughter echoing through the cabin. Sue chatted with her neighbor, unaware that darkness was closing in. Hours later, their peaceful retreat would transform into a scene of unspeakable horror. The very walls would cry out in silent testimony to the brutality inflicted that night. The following morning, the sun cast long shadows over the resort. A horrifying discovery awaited inside Cabin 28. Sue, John, and Dana lay lifeless, bound with electrical wire and medical tape. The murder weapons, a hammer and 2 knives, were left behind, a chilling testament to the killer's rage. Sue had fought bravely, her body bearing the brunt of the attack. John and Dana, bound and defenseless, had met the same gruesome fate. The brutality of the scene sent shockwaves through the small community. Who could commit such a heinous act, and why? Adding to the horror, 12-year-old Tina was missing. Had she been spared, or was she taken by the killer? The question hung heavy in the air, a terrifying mystery that would haunt investigators for years to come. The search for Tina became intertwined with the desperate hunt for the Keddie Cabin murderer. While the exact details of that fateful night remain shrouded in mystery, investigators pieced together a chilling timeline. Sometime after 10 p.m., when Sue last spoke to her neighbor, evil entered Cabin 28. The killer, or killers, subdued Sue, John, and Dana, binding them with meticulous care. The absence of defensive wounds on John and Dana suggests they were overpowered quickly, possibly while sleeping. The sheer brutality inflicted upon Sue, however, indicates a personal vendetta, a rage that knew no bounds. Was she the intended target all along? Amidst the chaos, Tina vanished. Did she witness the murders, her abductor whisking her away to silence her, or was she targeted for a more sinister purpose? The mystery of Tina's disappearance deepened the horror of the Keddie Cabin murders, adding a chilling layer to an already incomprehensible crime. The following morning, Sheila Sharp awoke to a strange silence. The usual sounds of her family were absent. Stepping into the living room, she stumbled upon a scene that would forever scar her young mind. Her mother, brother, and Dana lay dead, their bodies a testament to the horrors that unfolded just hours earlier. Overcome with terror, Sheila fled the cabin, seeking help from a neighbor. The authorities arrived to find a scene of unimaginable brutality. The murder weapons were left behind, as if placed deliberately. A bloody footprint, too small to belong to any of the victims, hinted at the presence of an unknown assailant. The tranquility of Ketty Resort was shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of a triple homicide. Whispers of the murders spread like wildfire, leaving the community reeling in shock and disbelief. Who could commit such a horrific act, and why target the Sharp family? The search for answers had begun, but the path to justice would prove long and arduous. Section 5. A labyrinth of clues. Despite the abundance of physical evidence, the Ketty cabin murders became a tangled web of dead ends and false leads. Fingerprints were lifted, DNA samples collected, but none matched any known offenders in the system. The bloody footprint, too small to be of any use, remained a haunting reminder of the killer's presence. The murder weapons, a hammer and 2 knives, offered little help. They were common household items, untraceable to any specific owner. Interviews with neighbors and acquaintances yielded no substantial breakthroughs. The killer, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Adding to the frustration, the crime scene had been compromised. Due to miscommunication and the chaotic nature of the initial investigation, potential evidence was lost or contaminated. The passage of time further muddied the waters, making it increasingly difficult to separate fact from fiction. Section 6. Shadows of Suspicion. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the investigation into the Ketty cabin murders stalled. The lack of concrete leads fueled speculation, casting a wide net of suspicion over the small community. Among the persons of interest, 2 names emerged from the shadows: Martin Smart and a man known only as Beau Boubaid. Martin Smart, a neighbor with a history of violence and mental instability, had quarreled with Sue Sharp in the days leading up to the murders. He had even made threats against the family, boasting to friends that he would take care of Sue. Adding to the suspicion, Smart vanished from Ketty shortly after the murders, his whereabouts unknown for several years. Beau Boubaid, a mysterious figure with a violent criminal record, had been hired by the resort's owner to do odd jobs. He had been seen near Cabin 28 on the night of the murders and was known to possess a hammer similar to the one used in the killings. However, no concrete evidence linked Boubaid to the crime, and he maintained his innocence until his death in 2001. Section 7. Whispers of Confession. In a chilling twist, years after the murders, a therapist came forward with a startling claim. He alleged that Smart, during a therapy session, confessed to his involvement in the Ketty cabin murders. According to the therapist, Smart admitted to killing Sue in a fit of rage after an argument. He claimed that Boubaid had assisted him in subduing the other victims and disposing of Tina's body. However, without corroborating evidence, Smart's alleged confession remained inadmissible in court. The therapist's notes, deemed unreliable due to the passage of time and the subjective nature of therapy sessions, were insufficient to secure an arrest warrant. Smart, who had resurfaced in Oregon, denied any involvement in the murders. He died in 2000, taking his secrets, if any, to the grave. Section 8. A Glimmer in the Wilderness. 3 years after the murders, a glimmer of hope emerged from the depths of despair. A skull fragment, later identified as Tina Sharp's, was discovered approximately 100 miles from Ketty. The discovery, while heartbreaking, brought a renewed sense of urgency to the investigation. Could this be the breakthrough they had been waiting for? Despite extensive searches, the rest of Tina's remains were never found. The location of the skull fragment, a remote area frequented by hunters and hikers, offered little in the way of new clues. The mystery of Tina's final moments and the identity of her abductor remained unsolved. Section 9. A Haunting Legacy. Over 4 decades have passed since the Ketty cabin murders, yet the case continues to captivate and confound. The brutality of the crime, the mystery surrounding Tina's disappearance, and the lack of a definitive resolution have left an indelible mark on the small mountain community. The case, though officially cold, remains open, a haunting reminder of the darkness that once descended upon Cabin 28. Will the Ketty cabin murders ever be solved? Will justice be served for Sue, John, Dana, and Tina? Or will their case remain an unsolved mystery, a chilling tale whispered around campfires and passed down through generations? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the memory of that horrific night in 1981 will forever linger in the shadows of the Sierra Nevada, a chilling reminder of the evil that men do. Germany lay in ruins after the First World War. The conflict had left the country devastated, with its cities reduced to rubble and its infrastructure in shambles. The war had not only taken a toll on the physical landscape, but also on the spirit of the German people. The once vibrant and industrious nation found itself grappling with the harsh realities of defeat and destruction. The once proud nation was defeated and humiliated. German soldiers returned home, not as heroes, but as symbols of a lost cause. The civilian population, too, bore the weight of this collective shame. The streets were filled with despondent faces, each one a testament to the deep sense of loss and disillusionment that had gripped the country. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed harsh penalties on Germany. The terms of the treaty were severe, stripping Germany of its territories, limiting its military capabilities, and demanding exorbitant reparations. The treaty was seen as a diktat, a forced agreement that left Germany with little room for negotiation or reprieve. It blamed Germany for the war and demanded crippling reparations. These reparations were not just financial burdens, they were a constant reminder of Germany's defeat and the humiliation that came with it. The headlines in the newspapers screamed of the heavy toll that the treaty would take on the nation's economy and its future. These reparations crippled the German economy. The financial strain was immense, leading to widespread poverty and hardship. Store shelves were often empty, and basic necessities became luxuries that few could afford. The economic landscape was bleak, with no immediate relief in sight. Millions were unemployed, and inflation spiraled out of control. The job market collapsed, leaving countless individuals without work. Inflation soared to unprecedented levels, rendering the German mark almost worthless. People found themselves in long lines waiting for any opportunity to earn a living, but jobs were scarce. People struggled to afford basic necessities. The cost of living skyrocketed, and families found it increasingly difficult to put food on the table. Bread, a staple of the German diet, became a symbol of the economic struggle, with prices fluctuating wildly and often beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. The social fabric of Germany was also in tatters. Homelessness became rampant, and many lived in dilapidated housing conditions. The sense of community and solidarity that had once defined German society was eroding, replaced by a pervasive sense of despair and hopelessness. Returning soldiers faced unemployment and trauma. These men, who had once fought bravely for their country, now found themselves begging on the streets. The psychological scars of war were deep, and the lack of support and recognition only compounded their suffering. The loss of life and the devastation of war left deep scars on the nation's psyche. War memorials dotted the landscape, each one a somber reminder of the lives lost. Families grieved for their loved ones, and the collective mourning became a part of the national consciousness. There was a widespread sense of anger, resentment, and betrayal. The German people felt betrayed by their leaders and the international community. Protests erupted, and the streets were filled with angry crowds demanding justice and retribution. Many Germans refused to accept responsibility for the war. They believed that the Treaty of Versailles was a gross injustice, an unfair punishment that did not reflect the true causes of the conflict. Anti-treaty demonstrations became a common sight, with people voicing their dissent loudly and passionately. They felt that the Treaty of Versailles was unjust and humiliating. Public speeches and protest signs echoed this sentiment, calling for a revision of the treaty's terms. The sense of national humiliation was palpable, and it fueled a growing desire for change and redemption. This atmosphere of despair and resentment created a fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Radical groups began to gain traction, offering simple solutions to complex problems. Political graffiti and extremist rallies became increasingly common, reflecting the volatile and polarized nature of the times. People were desperate for change and willing to listen to anyone who promised a better future. The desperation was palpable, and it made the population susceptible to the promises of radical leaders who claimed to have the answers to Germany's woes. The Weimar Republic, established in 1919, was weak and unstable. It struggled to maintain order and provide effective governance. The political system was fraught with inefficiencies, and the government was often seen as out of touch with the needs and concerns of the people. It was unable to provide the leadership and direction that Germany so desperately needed. Political debates were often inconclusive, and government meetings failed to produce meaningful solutions. The lack of decisive action only deepened the sense of crisis and instability. The political landscape became increasingly fragmented and polarized. Different factions vied for power, each with its own agenda and vision for the future. Political clashes were frequent, and the atmosphere was charged with tension and hostility. Numerous political parties emerged, each with its own vision for Germany's future. The multiplicity of parties made it difficult to achieve consensus, and the political scene became a battleground of competing ideologies and interests. On the left, the communists called for a revolution to overthrow the capitalist system. They saw the economic crisis as an opportunity to implement radical change and establish a new social order. Their rallies and speeches attracted those who were disillusioned with the status quo and eager for a new beginning. On the right, nationalist and anti-Semitic groups blamed Jews and other minorities for Germany's problems. They propagated a narrative of betrayal and scapegoating, which resonated with many who were looking for someone to blame for their suffering. Anti-Semitic propaganda became widespread, further deepening social divisions. Amidst this turmoil, a young and ambitious Adolf Hitler began his rise to power. He capitalized on the widespread discontent and presented himself as the savior who could restore Germany's former glory. His speeches and rallies drew growing crowds, setting the stage for a dramatic and dangerous shift in the nation's future. Adolf Hitler was born in Austria in 1889, in the small town of Braunau am Inn. His early years were spent in a modest household where his father, Alois Hitler, worked as a customs official. Alois was known to be strict and authoritarian, often clashing with young Adolf, who was a sensitive and artistic child. His childhood was marked by poverty and a difficult relationship with his father. Alois had high expectations for his son, hoping he would follow in his footsteps and pursue a career in the civil service. However, Adolf's interests lay elsewhere, particularly in the arts. Hitler was a poor student and dropped out of school at the age of 16. His academic struggles were compounded by the death of his father in 1903, which left the family in financial difficulty. Despite his lack of formal education, Hitler was an avid reader and developed a keen interest in history and politics. He dreamed of becoming an artist but was rejected twice by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. These rejections were a significant blow to his self-esteem and ambitions. He spent the next few years living a bohemian lifestyle in Vienna, painting and selling postcards to make ends meet. Hitler's time in Vienna proved to be a turning point in his life. The city, with its vibrant cultural scene and diverse population, exposed him to new ideas and perspectives. However, it also deepened his sense of alienation and resentment. He lived in poverty and was exposed to the city's underbelly. The harsh realities of life in Vienna, including the widespread poverty and social inequality, left a lasting impression on him. He often stayed in homeless shelters and soup kitchens, where he encountered many other disenfranchised individuals. Vienna was a melting pot of cultures, and Hitler developed a deep hatred for the city's diverse population. He was particularly hostile towards Jews, whom he blamed for many of society's ills. This period marked the beginning of his radicalization and the development of his anti-Semitic views. He was particularly hostile towards Jews, whom he blamed for many of society's ills. His exposure to anti-Semitic literature and propaganda further fueled his prejudices. He began to see Jews as the root cause of all the problems he perceived in society. During his time in Vienna, Hitler became increasingly interested in politics. He attended political meetings and read extensively on the subject. His views were influenced by the nationalist and anti-Semitic ideologies that were prevalent in Vienna at the time. He was drawn to the ideas of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and pan-Germanism. These ideologies resonated with his own beliefs and experiences. He began to see himself as a savior of the German people, destined to lead them to greatness. He read voraciously, devouring pamphlets and books that espoused these views. His reading included works by prominent nationalist and anti-Semitic writers, which further shaped his worldview. He became convinced that he had a mission to rid Germany of its perceived enemies. Hitler's experiences in Vienna shaped his worldview and set him on the path to becoming the leader of the Nazi Party. His time in the city was a formative period that influenced his later actions and beliefs. It was in Vienna that he developed the ideas that would later form the basis of his political ideology. His early life had instilled in him a deep sense of resentment and a desire for power. The combination of personal failures, economic hardship, and exposure to radical ideologies created a potent mix that fueled his ambitions. His failure to achieve his artistic ambitions left him bitter and disillusioned. He redirected his energies towards politics, where he believed he could make a greater impact. His artistic dreams may have been crushed, but they were replaced by a burning desire to reshape society according to his vision. Vienna, with its social and ethnic tensions, provided fertile ground for his prejudices to take root. The city's complex social fabric and the conflicts he witnessed there played a crucial role in the development of his extremist views. These early experiences in Vienna were instrumental in shaping the man who would later become one of history's most infamous figures. The economic and social turmoil that gripped Germany after World War I was profound and far-reaching. The nation was left in a state of disarray, with its economy shattered and its people struggling to survive. The war had drained Germany of its resources, and the subsequent peace treaty only exacerbated the situation. This created an ideal breeding ground for extremist ideologies like Nazism. The political landscape was chaotic, with numerous factions vying for power and influence. Amidst this chaos, extremist groups found fertile ground to spread their radical ideas. The humiliation of defeat and the harsh conditions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles left many Germans feeling angry and betrayed. The treaty not only stripped Germany of its territories and military power, but also imposed heavy reparations that crippled the economy. They yearned for a return to national glory and sought scapegoats for their misfortunes. Nationalistic fervor grew, and many Germans began to look for someone to blame for their suffering. This sense of betrayal and desire for revenge became a powerful force in German society. Hyperinflation wiped out savings and plunged the middle class into poverty. The value of the German mark plummeted, and people found themselves unable to afford basic necessities. This economic instability further fueled the sense of desperation and hopelessness. Mass unemployment fueled a sense of desperation and hopelessness, making radical solutions increasingly appealing. With millions out of work, the social fabric of the nation began to unravel. People were willing to listen to anyone who promised a way out of their dire situation. Traditional political parties seemed unable to offer effective solutions, further eroding public trust in the existing order. The Weimar Republic was seen as weak and ineffective, unable to address the pressing issues facing the nation. This lack of confidence in the government created a vacuum that extremist groups were eager to fill. In this climate of uncertainty and fear, extremist groups, including the fledgling Nazi Party, found a receptive audience for their message of hate and resentment. They promised strong leadership and a return to national greatness, appealing to those who felt abandoned by the current system. They exploited economic anxieties, preyed on national pride, and skillfully channeled public anger towards scapegoats like Jews and communists. By identifying clear enemies, they provided simple answers to complex problems which resonated with a populace desperate for change. Hitler's own experiences of poverty and social alienation in Vienna resonated with the anxieties of many Germans. His personal story of struggle and his ability to articulate the frustrations of the masses made him a compelling figure. He offered a seductive, albeit dangerous vision of a powerful and racially pure Germany that would reclaim its rightful place in the world. This vision, combined with his charismatic oratory, drew many to his cause, setting the stage for the rise of one of history's most infamous regimes. In 1919, Hitler joined a small and obscure political party called the German Workers' Party. This party shared his extreme nationalist and anti-Semitic views. Hitler quickly rose through the ranks, becoming its leader in 1921. He proved to be a charismatic and effective speaker, captivating audiences with his fiery rhetoric. Under Hitler's leadership, the party changed its name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short. He adopted the swastika as the party symbol and created a paramilitary organization called the Sturmabteilung, or SA. The SA, also known as brown shirts, were used to intimidate opponents and disrupt political meetings. The Nazi Party initially remained a fringe group with limited appeal. However, the party's fortunes changed dramatically after the Wall Street crash of 1929. The crash triggered a global economic depression, hitting Germany particularly hard. Millions were thrown out of work, and support for the Nazis surged. People were desperate for change, and saw Hitler as a strong leader who could restore Germany to greatness. The year was 1918. World War I was finally over. Germany was on the losing side. They signed a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles, which blamed Germany for the war. Germany had to pay a lot of money and give up land. Their military was also limited. This made the German people angry and ashamed. They felt like their leaders had betrayed them. The country was in chaos with different groups fighting for control. In 1919 they tried to start a democracy called the Weimar Republic, but it was weak from the beginning. The government had many problems, especially with the economy and extreme political groups. People wanted a strong leader who could bring back Germany's pride. They didn't know that a dangerous man, Adolf Hitler, would soon appear. In the 1920s, Germany started to recover. But then, the Wall Street crash of 1929 happened, and the whole world went into a Great Depression. Germany was hit very hard. Many people lost their jobs and their savings. Money became worthless. People were starving and desperate. This economic crisis made people lose faith in the Weimar Republic. They wanted a solution, any solution. Extreme political parties both on the left and the right became popular. The Nazis, led by Hitler, took advantage of this. They offered simple answers to complicated problems. They blamed the Jews, communists, and other groups for Germany's problems. Many Germans started to believe them. The Nazi Party started in 1920. At first it was a small group with little power. Hitler joined in 1921 and quickly became a leader. He was a captivating speaker who appealed to people's emotions. His speeches were full of nationalistic ideas. He promised to make Germany great again, and blamed the Jews and minorities for their problems. The Nazi Party slowly became more popular in the 1920s. The Great Depression gave them a huge opportunity. They promised jobs, food, and a return to Germany's former glory. This message resonated with people who were unemployed, hopeless, and felt betrayed by the government. The Nazis also used violence and intimidation against their opponents. Their paramilitary group, the SA, scared people and spread fear. By 1932, the Nazi Party was the biggest party in the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. This rise to power was not sudden, but the result of years of strategic planning, propaganda, and exploitation of the economic and political instability that plagued Germany after World War I. The Nazis promised to restore Germany to its former glory, a message that resonated with many Germans who were disillusioned with the current state of affairs. In January 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Hitler quickly took control. This appointment was a pivotal moment in history, as it marked the beginning of the end for the Weimar Republic and the start of a totalitarian regime. Hitler wasted no time in consolidating his power, using both legal and illegal means to eliminate his political opponents and secure his position. When the Reichstag building burned down in a suspicious fire, he used it as an excuse to take away people's freedoms. The Reichstag fire decree allowed him to arrest communists and other political adversaries, effectively silencing any opposition. This event was a turning point that enabled Hitler to push through his radical agenda with little resistance. The Enabling Act of 1933 gave Hitler absolute power. This act allowed him to enact laws without the involvement of the Reichstag, effectively rendering the parliament obsolete. With this newfound authority, Hitler began to reshape Germany according to his vision, dismantling democratic institutions and replacing them with mechanisms of total control. He banned all other political parties and created a totalitarian state. The Nazi regime used propaganda to manipulate public opinion and maintain control over the populace. Political dissent was not tolerated, and those who opposed the regime were swiftly dealt with, often through imprisonment or worse. With no one to oppose him, Hitler was free to do whatever he wanted. He used his charismatic oratory skills to rally the masses, promising a new era of prosperity and national pride. His speeches were designed to evoke strong emotions, often playing on fears and prejudices to unite the German people under his rule. He turned Germany into a one-party state and removed anyone he thought was disloyal from the government, courts, and military. This purge extended to all levels of society, ensuring that only those loyal to Hitler and the Nazi ideology held positions of power. This created an atmosphere of fear and obedience as people were afraid to speak out against the regime. He created concentration camps to imprison his enemies. These camps were initially used to detain political prisoners, but they soon expanded to include Jews, Romani people, and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. The conditions in these camps were horrific, and many prisoners did not survive. He started secretly building up the military, breaking the Treaty of Versailles. This rearmament was a clear violation of the treaty, but it went largely unchallenged by other nations at the time. Hitler's military buildup was part of his broader plan to expand German territory and establish a dominant position in Europe. Germany was now under Hitler's control, and the world was on the brink of war. The aggressive policies and actions of the Nazi regime set the stage for the outbreak of World War II, a conflict that would have devastating consequences for millions of people around the globe. Joseph Goebbels was a master of propaganda. He became the Minister of Propaganda and Public Enlightenment in 1933. Goebbels knew how powerful the media could be. He used radio, movies, newspapers, and posters to spread the Nazi message. He controlled everything people saw and heard and censored anything that didn't agree with Nazi beliefs. Goebbels' propaganda was very effective. It portrayed Hitler as a savior who would rescue Germany. It praised the Nazi Party and its ideas and made Jews, communists, and other groups look bad. This created an atmosphere of fear and hatred. Germans were constantly bombarded with Nazi propaganda. They were told that their country was surrounded by enemies, that they were the superior race, and that they had the right to rule over others. The Nazi regime was built on terror and violence. From the very beginning, the Nazis used fear as a tool to control the population and eliminate any form of dissent. Their rise to power was marked by a series of brutal actions aimed at consolidating their grip on Germany. The Gestapo, their secret police, ruthlessly eliminated any opposition. They operated with almost complete autonomy, arresting, torturing, and executing those who were seen as threats to the Nazi ideology. The mere mention of the Gestapo was enough to instill fear in the hearts of the people. Concentration camps like Dachau and Buchenwald were built to imprison anyone the Nazis didn't like, political opponents, intellectuals, and anyone who dared to speak out against the regime. These camps quickly became places of unimaginable suffering and death. Jews, Roma people, and other minorities were targeted with relentless persecution. The Nazis viewed these groups as inferior and sought to eradicate them from society. Homosexuals, people with disabilities, and others who did not fit the Nazi ideal were also persecuted. The regime's goal was to create a pure Aryan race, and anyone who did not conform to this vision was at risk. The Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, was the most horrific result of Nazi ideology. This genocide was meticulously planned and executed with the aim of completely annihilating the Jewish population in Europe. The persecution of Jews started slowly, with discrimination and violence. Anti-Semitic laws were enacted and Jews were increasingly marginalized and dehumanized. Jews lost their citizenship and were banned from certain jobs. They were forced to wear identifying badges and were subjected to constant harassment and violence. People refused to buy from their businesses. Jewish shops were boycotted and their owners were left with no means of livelihood. Then, on Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass in November 1938, Jewish businesses and synagogues were attacked. This pogrom marked a significant escalation in the Nazi campaign against the Jews. Thousands of Jews were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Families were torn apart, and many never saw their loved ones again. The Holocaust was a carefully planned and executed genocide. The Nazis devised the final solution, a plan to exterminate the Jewish people through mass murder. Jews were rounded up and sent to extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka. These camps were designed for efficient mass killing. They were gassed, shot, or worked to death. The scale of the atrocities committed during the Holocaust is almost beyond comprehension, and it remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. Hitler wanted Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. He believed Germany had the right to take land in the east. He first took over Austria in 1938. Then he demanded the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia where many Germans lived. The Munich Agreement, signed by Germany, Britain, France, and Italy, gave the Sudetenland to Germany. They hoped this would prevent a war, but it only made Hitler want more. In March 1939, Germany invaded and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France finally realized that appeasement had failed. They promised to protect Poland. But Hitler, undeterred, made a deal with the Soviet Union in August 1939. Secretly, they agreed to divide Eastern Europe between themselves. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, starting World War II. Hitler's rise to power and the horrors of the Holocaust show us the dangers of unchecked hatred, extreme nationalism, and totalitarian regimes. The Nazi ideology, rooted in racism and anti-Semitism, led to the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable. This dark chapter in history serves as a stark reminder of what can happen when humanity loses its moral compass. The world watched in horror as Hitler's war machine plunged Europe into darkness. Cities were reduced to rubble and countless lives were lost in the relentless pursuit of power. The devastation was not limited to the battlefield. Civilians suffered immensely, with families torn apart and entire communities obliterated. It took the combined might of the Allied forces to defeat Nazi Germany, but the cost of victory was immense. Brave soldiers from around the world fought valiantly, facing unimaginable horrors to bring an end to the tyranny. The liberation of concentration camps revealed the full extent of the atrocities committed, shocking the world and solidifying the resolve to ensure such evil would never rise again. Millions were dead, and the world was scarred. The physical and emotional wounds ran deep, with survivors bearing the weight of their experiences for the rest of their lives. The aftermath of the war left a landscape of destruction and a profound sense of loss that would take generations to heal. We must never forget the lessons of this dark time in history. The Nuremberg trials brought some measure of justice, holding key perpetrators accountable for their crimes. Yet the true justice lies in remembrance and education, ensuring that future generations understand the gravity of these events. We must always defend democracy and human rights. The establishment of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were steps towards a more just and peaceful world. These institutions and documents serve as a foundation for protecting the dignity and rights of all individuals, regardless of their background. We must challenge intolerance and discrimination whenever we see it. Racism, xenophobia, and other forms of bigotry have no place in our society. By standing up against these injustices, we honor the memory of those who suffered and ensure a more inclusive and equitable world for future generations. We must remember the victims of the Holocaust and fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of prejudice. The symbols of this dark period, such as the yellow stars and the gates of Auschwitz, serve as powerful reminders of the consequences of hatred. By keeping their memory alive, we commit to combating prejudice in all its forms. We must learn from the past to build a better future. Education is key to preventing history from repeating itself. By teaching the next generation about the Holocaust and the dangers of hatred, we equip them with the knowledge and empathy needed to create a more compassionate world. The words "never again" must be more than a slogan. They must be a commitment to action, a pledge to uphold the values of justice, equality, and human dignity. Every remembrance ceremony, every memorial event, is a call to renew this commitment. They must be a call to action. We must actively work to prevent the rise of hatred and intolerance in our communities. By engaging in dialogue, supporting human rights initiatives, and standing in solidarity with those who are marginalized, we can make a difference. We must all work together to make sure such atrocities never happen again. It is a collective responsibility that requires vigilance, education, and a commitment to the principles of humanity. Only by uniting in this cause can we hope to build a future free from the shadows of the past.